In the Chamber of Secrets, there are two crucial moments from the book which are completely removed from the film adaptation. These moments help develop key characters, add fun context to the wizarding world, and push forward the narrative of Harry's second year at Hogwarts in a way that builds the lore of the overall series. These two moments are Harry's discovery of Filch's dark secret and Sir Nicholas's Deathday party. If you've only seen the movies, these critical scenes probably don't ring a bell for you, but if you've read the books, you are most likely jumping out of your seat right now because nearly Headless Nick's Deathday party is one of the most iconic moments from the Golden Trio's second year. And on top of that, Filch's true background and lore gives reason to why Mrs. Norris was the first to get petrified. In the movie, we are left with absolutely no reason why this would happen, and these essential elements are neglected. But don't worry, because in today's video, I'm gonna peel back the curtain on these integral moments from the book and compare them to the film version, which is definitely lackluster. We'll discuss Filch's secret, the Deathday party, and the aftermath of the writing on the wall, which is quite different from the book version. And by the end of this video, I want to hear from you on whether you think the film ruined or perfected this adapted scene. My name is Gibby, and welcome back to episode 23 of Movies vs. Manuscripts Harry Potter Edition. This is the show where I analyze the Harry Potter movies scene by scene and compare them to J.K. Rowling's original books to find all the differences along the way. Today will be slightly different from your typical episode because the scene we get in the movie is only a few minutes, whereas the corresponding moment in the book takes about a chapter and a half. The first chapter is essentially what the movie completely removed, while the chapter after it is the inspiration for what we see in the movie. So that being said, the first half of today's analysis will focus on revealing what really happened in J.K. Rowling's version of the story, and then the second half will be going over all the changes made to what we actually do see in the film. Before we get started though, shout out to this commenter from a previous episode. Each week I highlight one of my favorite comments from a previous video, so be sure to share your thoughts down below when you're done watching. Per usual, I'll cover all the changes across the four major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But first, let's recap what happened in the movie's version of this scene. Picking up from where we left off last week, we see Harry meeting up with Ron and Hermione after his detention with Lockhart, and he continues to hear the creepy voice in the walls. He follows after it as Ron and Hermione run after him, and eventually they come to a hallway that has water all over the floor in puddles. The trio then sees a line of spiders leaving the castle through a hole in the windows, and then turning around they see the freaky sight of the writing on the wall, in what seems to be blood. After reading "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened, enemies of the air beware," they notice Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat, hanging from one of the torches on the wall. As Harry goes up to the frozen cat, the hallway is flooded with students and professors. Filch sees his cat and Harry underneath it and tries to kill him, but thankfully Dumbledore is there to stop Filch. After dismissing all the other students, Dumbledore says that the cat has been petrified and that she's still alive. Snape inquires as to why Harry was in this part of the castle, and luckily Lockhart vouches for Harry's absence at the Halloween feast due to having detention. The trio got away with it this time, but Dumbledore advises everyone to exercise caution moving forward. And finally, we see the three students heading back to Gryffindor Tower, and Harry asks his friends if he should have told Dumbledore that he was hearing a voice. Hermione then tells Harry that even in the wizarding world, hearing voices isn't a good sign. And that is where our scenes end for this week. So now that we know what the movie says happened, let's jump into our analysis by covering the first three categories of characters, timeline, and location. Starting with characters, we're missing quite a few, but they all share something in common. They're dead. Because Sir Nicholas's Deathday party is removed, we miss out on Peeves, Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore, random other ghosts and ghouls, and finally, Moaning Myrtle. That's right, we meet Moaning Myrtle at the Deathday party first, but in the movie, we won't see her until later on. Anyway, as for timeline, they remove a massive portion of the school year because they skip over Halloween, which is the same day as the Deathday party. So we're missing a couple months of Quidditch, classes, and more. And finally, for location, we're missing Lockhart's office, Filch's office, and the dungeon where the Deathday party is held. The most important omission out of these three is definitely Filch's office, which we'll be getting into here in a minute, as the first part of our plot changes has to do with Filch's big secret. But before we get there, I just wanted to remind you that if you're looking to experience the story of Harry Potter for the first time or the millionth time, you can check out the link in the description for a free trial of Audible, which gets you one free audiobook. This supports the channel and lets you dive into the wizarding world in a whole new way. Anyway, let's jump into the plot changes. Headless. As always, let's kick things off by going over the beginning of this chapter and all the little tidbits of details that J.K. Rowling adds at the start of each chapter to summarize what's been going on in Harry's life in between events. First, we learn that October had arrived and everyone was coming down with some type of cold. Madame Pomfrey, the school nurse, had concocted a potion to remedy the sickness, but it caused steam to pour out of your ears for a little while after you took it. We read that Ginny Weasley had been looking extra pale recently, and Percy forced her to take some of this medication. Of course, we know that Ginny wasn't sick, but pale for an entirely different reason. Second, although rain had been coming down hard, Oliver Wood hadn't let that stop the Gryffindor Quidditch team from practicing. The chapter picks up as Harry is coming in from a long practice, completely soaked and covered in mud. However, before we learn more about what happens after Harry comes back inside, we get a quick sentence about the Slytherin team, as the Weasley twins had been spying on their practice and informed Wood that their new Nimbus 2001s were faster than any broom they'd ever seen before. And on this depressing, wet, and muddy note, we pick up with Harry trotting through the halls as he headed back to Gryffindor Tower. And now that brings us to the first real omission, which is part one of two major removals that the movie made to these scenes. As I've already mentioned a few times, this week's scenes are extremely abrupt because they skip straight from Harry's detention with Lockhart to the writing on the wall. But in our book version, we need to address two massive omissions. First is Harry's visit to Filch's office and his discovery of a very important detail about that character, and second is nearly Headless Nick's involvement in his Deathday party. So that being said, let's jump into the first omission, which is Harry's close call with Filch. However, this doesn't start with Filch himself, but actually Sir Nicholas, because in the book, these two interactions are heavily intertwined. So as Harry walked through the halls of Hogwarts, he ran into Sir Nicholas, who seemed to be mumbling to himself. After saying hello, Nick inquired about Harry's down attitude, as Harry definitely was not feeling great after the news about the Slytherin team, on top of a muddy practice. But instead of giving a straight answer, Harry replied, "Well, so do you," as the ghost was clearly preoccupied himself. And oh boy, Harry opened a can of worms that he wasn't expecting, because this simple line launched Nick into a massive explanation of why he was feeling down, and he showed Harry his rejection letter from the Headless Hunt. If you recall, this ghost group gets a name drop earlier in the films, but other than that, it's pretty much excluded. Essentially, the Headless Hunt is a special ghost club of sorts which only admits those who are completely headless. Well, as we know, nearly Headless Nick gets his nickname for good reason, as he has less than an inch of skin holding his head to his ghostly body. And we also learn why this is the case, as Nick tells Harry how he died, which was getting hit 45 times with a blunt axe during his execution. Anyway, we can tell that this exclusive club is one that Nick was trying to get into for quite a while, and he's upset that they won't let him in. After explaining all of this and showing the rejection letter to Harry, Nick finally turned the question back on the student and asked why Harry was looking depressed. Harry explained that it's because of Quidditch, but before he could continue, he got cut off by a meowing sound beneath him, and looked down to see Mrs. Norris staring back at him. Sir Nicholas then told Harry that he should get a move on, because Filch has been in a bad mood as some third years accidentally plastered frog brains all over the ceiling in Dungeon 5, and Filch has been cleaning it all day. Unfortunately, it was too late as Filch was already on his way to his cat, who seemed to have a telepathic connection with him. After seeing Harry dripping with rain and mud all over the castle floor, Filch was furious and took Harry with him to his office. Now I know we've covered a lot so far and we're just now getting to Filch's office, which is the main part of this omission we discussed, but trust me, knowing the part about Sir Nicholas will be crucial for our next omission, which is the Deathday party. But anyway, back to Filch's office, Harry sat down as Filch got a form out of one of his drawers and began filling it out. Before he could continue with the form, he heard a loud bang above his office and immediately knew the culprit. Peeves. Our beloved Peeves is back once again as Filch ran off to catch the poltergeist who was wreaking havoc above his office. After Filch left, Harry figured he should probably stay put and wait, and after looking around Filch's old dirty office, he noticed something out of place. A large, glossy purple envelope with silver lettering on it. After checking that Filch wasn't coming back anytime soon, Harry took the letter and read it. At the top it said, "Quick Spell, a correspondence course in beginner magic." Now, I don't have time to read word for word the rest of the letter, but that title sort of explains what you need to know, and we'll learn more about this later on. Anyway, Filch returned as Harry was still reading the letter and was so shocked to see Harry snooping through this item that he let Harry go without even giving him detention. The last words Filch said were pretty much just rambling, as he obviously was very embarrassed that Harry had seen this specific letter. But Harry left and then ran into Sir Nicholas again in the hall. Now, before I go into the next omission, which is the Deathday party, I wanted to share a fun little Easter egg, which is that the loud bang which drew Filch's attention was the sound of Peeves knocking over a large vanishing cabinet and breaking it. And yes, this vanishing cabinet is the same one that is later used by Draco in the Room of Requirement. and if you recall, Draco has to mend it. Well, now you know why. It's funny to think that J.K. Rowling had foreshadowed this so early on, as earlier in this book we also learn of the sister vanishing cabinet in Borgin and Burke's, which is the same cabinet Harry hides in when he accidentally arrives in that shop. Anyway, that's not really a change, but rather a little fun fact that I wanted to share. Now let's move on to our second massive omission, and talk about the all-important Deathday party. After exiting Filch's office, Harry ran into Nick once again, and we learned that Nick was the one who encouraged Peeves to knock over the cabinet. After learning that Sir Nicholas was his hero who saved him from getting detention or worse, Harry thanked him profusely and said, "I wish there was a way I could help you get into the Headless Hunt." After hearing this, Nick mentioned that Harry couldn't help in that way, but there's something else he could do, which would be to attend Nick's 500th Deathday party on Halloween. Now, this is a big deal for two reasons. First, humans don't go to Deathday parties. Second, this would be at the same time as the Hogwarts Halloween Feast, which is one of the most anticipated events of the year for students, so Harry would be sacrificing his time there if he attended the Deathday party. But seeing as Nick just saved him from Filch, and Harry also wasn't aware of all that a Deathday party would entail, he agreed to attend, and Sir Nicholas left much happier than before. The book then cuts to a later time as Harry is filling Ron and Hermione in on what just happened with Sir Nicholas, and the fact that he agreed, for all three of them, to go to the Deathday party. Hermione, who's always ready for a new learning opportunity, was eager to go to this party, but Ron, who's a bit more realistic, guessed that this party would be extremely depressing. We also get a quick note that Harry was about to tell Ron and Hermione about the quick spell letter he found in Filch's office, but quickly forgot as explosions of fireworks started going off in the common room. Turns out that Fred and George had been trying to get a salamander to eat filibuster fireworks, and the result was about what you would expect. Anyway, Halloween quickly approached and Harry was regretting his choice to attend the Deathday party, as the usual decorations were in the Great Hall with the addition of Hagrid's massive pumpkins, which were large enough for 3 grown men to sit in. Plus, a rumor had been going around that Dumbledore booked a dancing skeleton group to perform, and now Harry was gonna miss it. But when you're friends with Hermione, there's no going back on your word, as she bossily reminded Harry that he had promised Nick that he would go. Knowing that she was right, the trio set off towards the dungeon booked for Nick's Deathday party, and as they arrived, they saw a dreary scene of hundreds of ghosts floating around, an atrocious table of food which didn't look safe for human consumption, and the noise of what sounded like 1,000 fingernails scraping on a chalkboard. Plus, stepping into the ghost-infested dungeon was like walking into a freezer, and Ron reminded them to avoid walking through anyone. Then, as the trio walked on, we have one of the most important details of this party. Hermione suddenly stopped them and said that they needed to turn back because she saw none other than Moaning Myrtle. Of course, most of the girls at school were acquainted with Myrtle, but the boys had no idea what Hermione was talking about. Sadly, this interaction was unavoidable as they ran into Peeves instead, and Peeves called Myrtle over since he overheard Hermione talking about her. The conversation that ensued was about what you would expect, with Myrtle playing the victim as she turned every comment into an insult against herself, and Peeves didn't help as he started throwing things at her and calling her pimply. Thankfully, the trio was saved from this continuous torture by 2 of the most annoying people at the party, as Nick floated over their way and asked if they were enjoying themselves. But before they could talk much more, there was a sound of a hunting horn, and a group of headless ghosts galloped in on some horses. This group was none other than the Headless Hunt, their leader being Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore, the same person who wrote Nick's rejection letter that we talked about earlier. The jolly ghost came over to Nick and greeted him, and Harry could tell that Nick was not happy to see Sir Patrick, who was getting the audience to laugh by using his head as a comedic prop. For example, at the sight of Harry and his friends, Sir Patrick jumped in fake fright, causing his head to fall off, which got a good laugh out of the surrounding ghosts. This did not please Sir Nicholas, who was upset the attention was getting away from him, and he went to try to make a speech, but found no one was paying attention to him as a group of the Headless Ghosts started playing head hockey. Not able to hold out much longer in this dreadful scene, the trio decided to make a break for it, and finally escaped the dungeon without getting stopped. Ron was eager to see if any pudding was left in the Great Hall from the Halloween feast, but this delightful thought was cut short as Harry stopped dead in his tracks after hearing the creepy voice once again. And that is where scenes in the movie pick up from. But before we move on to those changes regarding the actual movie scenes, I want to hear from you about these 2 massive omissions that we just covered. First, we've got Filch, who has a massive secret that is slowly getting uncovered and will be fully revealed by the end of this video. And second, we have the most iconic party Harry has ever been to, and also the place where we meet Moaning Myrtle for the first time. Why do you think these moments were removed? And do you wish they would have kept them? Let me know in the comments below. But now that we've covered the exclusions, let's analyze the scenes that we do get to see and uncover each change made between those and their corresponding pages in the book. starting with the trio chasing after the voice in Harry's head and their discovery of the writing on the wall. The first change we have here is the simple addition of the spiders exiting through a hole in the window of the castle. This does not happen at this point in the book, but the movie was setting up for Aragog's future scenes, so I get why they put it in there. What really happened is that after they exited the dungeon and Harry heard the hissing voice of the basilisk, the trio ran from the dungeon level all the way up to the entrance hall, where they could hear the shouts and laughter of students enjoying the Halloween feast. Then Harry heard the voice continuing upward, so the trio went up to the second level and searched every corridor. Upon coming across the last hall, they saw a puddle underneath the writing on the wall and then Mrs. Norris. Unfortunately for them, the Halloween feast had let out just moments before this, and so herds of students were heading in their direction. And that's how we get the scene we see in the movie. The next change we have is that the exchange between the trio, Dumbledore, the professors, and Filch does not happen in the corridor, but rather in Lockhart's office. Instead of sending all the students away, Dumbledore simply took the affected parties to the nearest office, which was Lockhart's. It is then in this location that Dumbledore set down Mrs. Norris, who he had plucked off the torch bracket she was hanging from, and began to examine her. Similarly to the movie, Lockhart kept blabbing about how he could have saved the cat as Dumbledore continued his examination. Then, after Lockhart deemed the cat dead, to Filch's agony, Dumbledore said that Mrs. Norris was simply petrified, and that no second year would have the abilities to do that type of dark magic. And this is where we have a very key omission, which continues our previous Filch narrative. You see, Filch was still adamant that Harry had done this because of what was written on the wall, and as Filch continued to blame Harry, he slowly got out, "He knows I'm a squib." Harry then denied ever touching Mrs. Norris, and then added onto this that he doesn't even know what a squib is. Now, to skip ahead a bit, because the book doesn't share the details of what a squib is until later on in the chapter, a squib is a child born of wizarding parents who then ends up having no magical ability. And what in the wizarding world is worse than a muggle-born wizard? Well, a wizard-born muggle. The quick spell letter Harry read earlier in Filch's office is a letter mainly for squibs, as sort of a way to teach magic to those who have no magic ability, although I'm not sure if quick spell is a scam or not. Regardless, to piece it all together now, Filch believes that Harry wrote that on the wall because a squib is just as bad as a mudblood in the eyes of the heir of Slytherin, so Filch feels that he is being directly attacked. This detail of Filch being a squib helps to flesh out his character even more, and makes you realize that he's the grumpy caretaker of Hogwarts for a reason. Why else do you think he hates all of the younger students flaunting their magic around him? It's because he himself was born into the wizarding world, but cannot use magic. I don't know about you, but that would make me pretty frustrated as well. This detail of Filch's background will be something that carries on throughout the entire Harry Potter series, and the omission of it in the movies makes me think that this is one of those details that the producers just said, well, you should have read the books. There's lots of things about the wizarding world like this, where the creators of the movie just assume that the viewer knows the wizarding world, but I feel like this detail should have been kept in. But anyway, to move on to our next change, we come to Snape and his comments during this interaction. Just like in the movie, Snape says that Harry must have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, but still, it's odd that they were up there and not at the Halloween feast. There are two changes with Snape's comments here. The first being that Lockhart doesn't vouch for Harry since Harry didn't come from detention, but rather the Deathday party. In the book, the trio launched into the explanation that they were at the Deathday party, and there are hundreds of ghosts who can corroborate this alibi. But then Snape asked why they didn't return to the feast, since he didn't think Deathday parties had food fit for human consumption. Ron then remarked that they weren't hungry, as his stomach growled, and Snape saw this as his opportunity to pounce. Which brings us to the second change regarding Snape's involvement, as Snape suggested that Harry should be kept off the Quidditch team until he is ready to tell the truth. McGonagall then stepped in and said that that would be ridiculous since Mrs. Norris wasn't hit over the head with Harry's broomstick. After this, Dumbledore assured Filch that they could create a potion which would cure Mrs. Norris's condition, and Lockhart said that he would make it since he's done it 100 times, and Snape coldly replied with, "I believe I am the potions master at this school." And after an awkward pause, Dumbledore dismissed the trio. And now we have the final change, which is yet another line swap between Ron and Hermione. You know, I don't think I can keep up with all of these line changes, and I usually try to avoid going through the dialogue in detail. But this seems to be such a common theme and impacts character development so much that I feel like I should bring up the times that Ron's lines are stolen from him. As the trio headed back to Gryffindor Tower, we have almost an identical conversation to the one in the movie, in which Ron and Hermione tell Harry that hearing voices isn't normal even for wizards. But the thing is, in the book, Ron is the one who has this exact line, not Hermione. Again, in the book, Hermione is very smart, but she's still Muggle-born. She wasn't raised in a wizarding family. so it makes sense that Ron would be the one to fill Harry in on what is normal or not in the wizarding world. Whereas the movie completely disregards this and gives all types of lines to Hermione, even though she really shouldn't be knowledgeable about the wizarding world like that. Plus, Ron is the one who tells Harry what a squib is, but we already covered that earlier. In the book, after Ron filled Harry and Hermione in on what a squib is and the fact that hearing voices isn't normal even for wizards, they heard the clock chime midnight and rushed back to Gryffindor Tower so as not to get in trouble for being out late. And that is where the changes end for this week. So now that you've heard the full story of our two massive omissions, do you think that they were rightly removed? Nearly Headless Nick's Deathday party is such an iconic moment, but perhaps even more crucial to the plot is Filch's background as a squib. And by the way, I know that the extended version of the movie has references to this, but 99% of people haven't seen that version. And if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you'll know that once I finish the Chamber of Secrets, I'll do a bonus episode covering all the extended edition scenes. For now, comment your thoughts below and let me know how you would have handled these moments if you were put in charge of the movie. As always, be sure to like and subscribe and check out the series playlist to catch up on any episodes you might have missed so far. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode.